The year was 1884, in the sun-seared basin of New Mexico Territory, where mesquite clung to dry soil and the wind spoke in whispers of regret. Folks in that stretch of land didn't care much for softness, of speech, of body, or of heart, and none carried that truth heavier than Maybelle Hawthorne. She was 17 summers old, with hair the color of prairie wheat and a frame that filled the doorway of her father's ranch house. Her mother had died young, and from the moment Maybelle grew wide in the hips and round in the face, her daddy looked at her with something less than love. "Too much woman for any man," he'd mutter at supper, carving meat like it was a warning. "Ain't no husband gonna want all that to carry." He never called her pretty. He called her practical, though never with pride. Maybelle had long since stopped hoping to change his mind. She carried her weight with quiet dignity, tended the stock, hauled feed, and kept the ledgers tighter than a banker's grip. But usefulness weren't love, and her daddy, Jed Hawthorne, had his eyes set on marrying off her younger sister, Delilah, slim and pale and flighty as a barn swallow. Trouble was, the ranch was drowning in debt. The cattle were thin from drought, and Jed's gambling hands had bled the bank account dry. That's when he made the deal. "I gotta work her down in the south lot," Jed told Maybelle one night, his voice thick with whiskey. "Strong fella. Half black, half Choctaw. Saved my skin durin' that bronco stampede last month. He's asked for a place to lay his head, a woman to share his nights. I told him he could have you." Maybelle didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just stood there, her fists clenched so tight her knuckles turned white beneath her sun-browned skin. "You gave me away." Jed didn't blink. "You weren't gonna fetch a dowry no how. Least this way. You can earn your keep." The next morning, she packed a single satchel. No one saw her off. Not Delilah, not Jed. She rode out in silence, the sky overhead wide and empty. Elijah Booker was waiting by the barn, his sleeves rolled up over arms like tree trunks, the sun glinting off the sweat on his neck. He didn't look surprised when Maybelle dismounted and met his gaze straight on. "You're her?" he asked, voice low and gravel-rich. "I reckon I am." He nodded slow. "Name's Elijah. I ain't expectin' nothin' but honesty, Miss Hawthorne. Your father said you'd be stayin'. I said I'd build a second room, but I ain't a cruel man." Maybelle looked him over. His eyes were dark and steady, not like her father's, full of scorn, but calm, measuring. He was taller than any man she'd met, shoulders broad, hands calloused from honest work. But it wasn't his size that unnerved her. It was his gentleness. "You don't want this neither," she said. "I didn't ask for a woman to own. I asked for someone who wouldn't flinch when I walked through the door." They stood there a while in the late morning heat, the silence not awkward but heavy, like a choice hanging in the air. "Well," Maybelle said finally, "if I'm to be here, I'll earn it. I cook, I stitch, I run numbers, and I ain't afraid of mud or manure." Elijah cracked a smile, not wide, not quick, but real. "Good," he said, "because I burn everything I touch, and the ledgers look like a drunkard wrote him." She blinked, surprised. Then, to her own astonishment, she laughed. That was how it started. Not with love, nor with lust, but with two people standing beneath a sky too wide to care about appearances, each with their own wounds stitched tight behind their ribs. That night, Elijah lit a fire and cooked beans with ham bone while Maybelle set the table. They didn't speak much, didn't need to, but when he handed her a bowl, his hand brushed hers and didn't pull away too quick. "Got a room ready for you," he said after supper, nodding toward the smaller cabin nearby. "Built it last fall. Was gonna use it for tools." She followed him through the dark, the lantern in his hand throwing gold light on the dust. The room was small but clean. The bed had been made with care. "I'll take the big house," Elijah said, pausing in the doorway. "Ain't right to rush things." Maybelle sat on the edge of the bed. "You ain't what I expected," she whispered. He didn't smile, just tipped his hat and said, "You neither, Miss Maybelle. And that might just be a good thing." He closed the door gentle behind him. The days that followed settled like dust on a dry fence post, slow and steady. Maybelle rose each morning with the sun, her boots on before the rooster crowed. Elijah worked the land like it owed him blood, and she worked beside him without complaint. They didn't speak much, but there was a rhythm to their silence, like two old songs playing in harmony. Elijah never once looked at her like her father had, not with judgment, not with shame. He'd glance up from chopping wood or mending fence line and nod, just a simple acknowledgement. But it meant more than 1,000 flowery compliments. Still, there was a thunder in Maybelle's chest that wouldn't quiet. She wasn't used to kindness without a price. One morning, while she was kneading bread dough, she caught Elijah watching her through the open kitchen door. He was leaned against the porch post, arms crossed, sweat gleaming on his brow. When their eyes met, he didn't look away. "You always cook with that much fire in you?" he asked. Maybelle wiped her hands on her apron. "Only when I'm thinking too hard." He stepped inside, slow. "About what?" She hesitated, then said, "About how long you plan to keep pretending, like this arrangement is just for labor." Elijah set his hat on the table and sat down. "Ain't pretending, Maybelle. I told your father I needed help. He gave you. That's wrong. But now you're here, and I see a woman who's stronger than most men I've met. I ain't trying to trap you." She frowned. "Then what are you trying to do?" He looked her square in the eyes. "I'm trying to give us a chance, if you want one." A chance. It wasn't a love confession. It wasn't a promise. It was a gate swung open. She didn't answer, just turned back to the dough, her heart pounding like hooves in her chest. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Maybelle stood on the porch, watching Elijah water the horses. His movements were precise, gentle for a man so broad. She'd known men like him were rare, carved from the land itself, but with hands that knew when to be soft. She stepped down from the porch. "I want to see where you keep the cattle," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "Now, it's near dark." "I ain't afraid of dark," she replied. He chuckled and fetched a lantern. "All right then, follow me." They walked together along the trail that wound down to the creek bend. The cattle were bedded, their breath rising in soft clouds. The sky above them was thick with stars. "This land's got scars," Elijah said, his voice low. "Used to be owned by a man who beat every creature he ever met. I bought it cheap after he died in a fire." Maybelle touched the fence rail. "You ever think of leaving? Finned in someplace softer?" He looked at her, the lantern casting golden light across his jaw. "Don't need soft. I need true. And this land, like you, Maybelle, it's true." She stared at him, words drying up in her throat. No one had ever said her name like that before, like it meant something solid. Without thinking, she reached out and laid a hand on his forearm. He didn't flinch. His hand covered hers, rough and warm. "You deserve more than what you were given," he said softly. "You ain't a burden. You're a blessing." The wind stirred the grass. A coyote howled in the distance, and Maybelle, strong, scarred, and unsure, felt something crack open in her chest. Not pain, not sorrow, just hope. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like she was too much. She felt just right. By the time June rolled in, the air in the valley hung thick with heat and prairie dust. Morning started early and ended with sore backs and sweat-streaked faces. But in Elijah's homestead, the silence between him and Maybelle had softened into something easier, like a well-worn saddle that didn't chafe no more. Still, there was weight neither one dared put to words. Maybelle had made the small cabin into a home. She stitched curtains from old flour sacks, brewed chicory every morning, and filled the air with the smell of roasted corn and brown sugar biscuits. Elijah, for his part, kept the fences strong and the stock healthy. He brought her fresh wildflowers most Sundays, not saying nothing, just sat in. On the table with a nod. One evening, a storm brewed sudden-like, black clouds rolling in from the west. Elijah rode back late, drenched from head to boot, hat limp in his hand. Maybelle met him on the porch with a towel and a frown. "You got a death wish riding through that mess," she scolded. He chuckled low. "Had to get the mare from the north pasture. She'd gone lame. Might have gotten swept if I'd waited." She helped him strip off his soaked coat, her hands brushing against his arm, the muscle hard beneath the wet fabric. They stood there a moment too long. "I can take it from here," he said, voice rougher than usual. She nodded and stepped back, but her heart kicked like a wild colt. Later that night, the wind howled, rattling the windows. Maybelle couldn't sleep. She wrapped her shawl tight and crept across the yard to the big house. She found Elijah by the fire, shirtless, a thin scar trailing across a shoulder blade. He didn't turn when she entered, just spoke soft. "Storm woke you." She hesitated, then said, "It's not the storm that keeps me up. It's all the things I ain't said." He finally looked at her then, eyes steady, quiet. "Sam." Maybelle stepped closer. "I was raised to believe I weren't enough. Not pretty, not light, not worth being wanted. And now here you are, looking at me like I'm not a mistake." "You ain't," Elijah said simply. "But why me?" Her voice cracked. "Why care?" He stood and closed the space between them, not touching her, just standing close enough she could feel the warmth off his skin. "Because you ain't pretending. You carry yourself like a mountain, quiet, unmoved, but always there. And because I know what it's like to be judged before a word's spoken." Maybelle's breath hitched. He reached for her hand, calloused fingers brushing her palm. "I ain't a skin for promises tonight, May. Just don't shut me out." She squeezed his hand, eyes stinging with tears. "I ain't going nowhere." The thunder rolled above, and in that small room, with the fire low and the wind screaming at the walls, they stood wrapped in silence, not alone, not afraid, but found. By July, the cottonwoods along the river had gone silver in the wind, and so had the whispers in town. Word had gotten out about the Hawthorne girl living out past the Red Bluff, sharing land with a man named Booker, a man with skin dark as midnight and shoulders like a blacksmith's anvil. It didn't sit easy with folks. Maybelle and Elijah hadn't asked for anyone's approval, but the West has a long memory and a short temper, and it don't take much to stir up trouble. They first noticed it when Elijah rode into town for supplies and found the mercantile closed early, though the smoke from the chimney told a different story. Next time, the blacksmith forgot his order. The third time, someone had etched the word beast into the back of Elijah's wagon. He didn't tell Maybelle right away, just worked harder, quieter. But Maybelle noticed. She always did. One evening, while she was mending a rip in his shirt, she saw the wear in his eyes, the kind that comes from old battles, ones that never leave scars on the skin. "Elijah," she said, "what's got your shoulders so heavy lately?" He hesitated. "They don't like what we've built. Ain't the first time I've seen it." "Do I look like someone who needs protecting?" she snapped, tossing the shirt down. He looked at her, truly looked, and smiled, but there was sorrow in it. "No, ma'am. You look like someone worth standing beside when the wind kicks up. But I seen men do awful things over less than a woman's pride." Maybelle crossed the room and took his face in her hands. "Then let him come. I ain't ashamed of what we've got, Elijah Booker, and I'll be darn gayed if I let fear turn me quiet." He leaned his forehead to hers. "You're fire wrapped in flesh, Maybelle." "And you," she whispered, "are the calm in the storm I never knew I needed." That night, they didn't kiss. They didn't have to. What passed between them was louder than lips. It was choice. It was promise. The very next week, Jed Hawthorne came riding down the ridge, his gray gelding foaming at the bit. Maybelle was chopping wood when she saw him. He dismounted like he owned the dirt beneath him. "You bring shame on the family name, girl," he spat. She straightened, axe still in hand. "You traded me off like a sack of seed. You don't get to speak of shame." Jed's eyes burned. "You think he loves you? You think he sees you as something more than charity?" Elijah stepped onto the porch, arms folded across his chest, calm as ever. "I see her clearer than you ever did." Jed's hand twitched near his coat, but Elijah didn't flinch. Maybelle took a step forward. "You lost your say the moment you handed me off like I weren't your blood." "You ungrateful," Jed snarled. "I ain't your burden," she said, voice rising. "And I ain't your property. I am Maybelle Booker now, and I ain't talking your poison." Jed stared at them, chest heaving. Then, without a word, he turned and rode off into the dust. They stood there long after the hooves had faded. "You really mean that?" Elijah asked, voice low. She looked up at him, eyes steady. "I meant every word." And when he kissed her then, slow, reverent. It felt like the whole prairie held its breath. August baked the earth until it cracked like old leather, and the crops begged for mercy under a sun that showed none. But the land wasn't the only thing feeling parched. Something in Maybelle had begun to ache, not from loneliness, but from the want of more. More than survival, more than respect. She wanted love that was spoken aloud, love that reached for her in daylight, not just in glances and quiet gestures. Elijah gave her all the right things: shelter, kindness, the steadiness of a good man. But Maybelle was ready for the next step. She just didn't know how to ask for it. So she showed it instead. She started plaiting her hair soft and long, wearing her Sunday dress even on Wednesdays. She'd bake peach cobbler when the orchard barely gave enough fruit for one pie. She laughed more, sang under her breath when she cooked, and let her fingers linger on Elijah's shoulder when she passed behind him. He noticed. He always noticed. One afternoon, after they finished mending a busted fence line, Elijah took off his gloves and sat beside her in the shade of a cottonwood. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked. She looked up, surprised. "You planning to?" He shook his head. "No, but I think about what it'd be like to build fresh. Maybe out west, near water. A proper house. A barn that don't leak." "And me?" she asked soft. "You picture me there too?" He turned to her, eyes deep as the Pecos. "Always." Maybelle's heart leapt, but still she pushed. "Then what are we waiting for?" Elijah tilted his head. "You tell me." She took a breath. "I want to marry you, Elijah. Not for paperwork. Not to prove nothing to nobody. I want it because I love you." He didn't smile at first. He just looked at her, long and quiet, the way a man looks at sunrise after a long winter. Then he stood, held out his hand, and helped her up. "Then let's stop waiting," he said. They didn't have a preacher, or rings, or church bells. Just the two of them, standing by the creek with their hands clasped, and the wind carrying their vows to the mesquite and the sky. "I promise to stand beside you, through drought and storm," Maybelle said. "And I promise to love you, full and fierce, no matter what the world says," Elijah replied. He kissed her there, slow, sure, with both hands on her face like she was made of the rarest glass. And when they walked back toward the homestead, the world felt different. Not new, not easier, but claimed. They spent that night wrapped in each other, not rushed, not hidden. Just them, skin to skin, every scar and softness bared without shame. Maybelle had never felt more seen, more wanted. Every inch of her cherished, not in spite of her body, but because of it. Outside, the wind whispered through the grass. Inside, love breathed steady and true. Married life on the frontier wasn't all sweet tea and soft kisses. It was mud, sweat, and the stubborn grind of two souls learning to live as one. But Elijah and Maybelle, they carried it well. Their days were long, sunup to sundown, working side by side. And at night, they'd sit on the porch, fingers intertwined, listening to the cicadas sing while the moon painted silver across the prairie. But peace, like harvest, don't come without work. Trouble came in the form of Amos Green, a rancher from 3 Ridges East. He was thick-necked and red-eyed, the kind of man who didn't believe a black man had any right to own land, let alone share it with a white woman who laughed in his direction. He rode up one morning with 2 men behind him, all 3 in dust-caked hats and bitter smiles. "Elijah Booker," Amos drawled. "I come to remind you who this land used to belong to." Elijah stepped off the porch slow, jaw tight. "Land changed hands fair and legal. Don't see what business it is of yours." Amos spat in the dirt. "Businesses. Folks don't take kindly to your kind making a mockery of marriage. You and your woman best consider moving on." Maybelle stepped forward then, shotgun resting on her shoulder, calm as a sunrise. "Elijah don't need to answer for our marriage," she said. "But I will. You got a problem with this union. You bring it to me." Amos narrowed his eyes. "You think you're strong enough to stand against what's coming?" Maybelle didn't flinch. "Stronger than you'll ever be, Amos Green." That night, Elijah locked the barn and loaded his rifle. Not because he was scared, but because he knew men like Amos weren't made of backbone. They were made of fire and jealousy. and both had a way of burning everything good. A week passed. Then two. Tension hung like humidity, thick and mean. One night, Maybelle came down with a fever. Her skin turned hot as the stove, and she trembled in the sheets, whispering nonsense about her mama and a church bell. Elijah didn't leave her side. Not once. He kept a cloth to her forehead and whispered calm words, his voice low and steady. "You're all right, darling. You hear me? I ain't going nowhere." She moaned, tears slipping from her eyes. "Don't let them take this from us, Elijah." He kissed her temple. "They won't. Not while I breathe." By dawn, the fever broke, and when Maybelle opened her eyes, she saw Elijah asleep in the chair beside her, his hand still holding hers. "You stayed," she croaked. He didn't open his eyes, just smiled and murmured, "Always." That day, as Maybelle gained her strength back, a letter arrived, official and stamped with the county seal. It was from the land office. Someone had contested Elijah's deed, a challenge to their homestead, likely Amos, stirring trouble with money and lies. But Elijah didn't waver. "We'll fight it," he said. "We built this life with our own hands, and I won't let them take it." Maybelle nodded. "Then we'll fight. Together." Their love was no longer just a comfort. It was a cause, a banner. And together, they prepared for the fire sure to come. Late September brought the first bite of autumn and a fresh kind of danger. With the county judge Callan for a formal hearing over the contested deed, Elijah and Maybelle knew they'd have to ride into town and stand before men who looked at love like a ledger sheet, counting bloodlines and skin before truth. But Maybelle had never been one to cower, and Elijah? He'd stared down worse than a judge with ink-stained fingers. Still, there was unease in the air. Chickens stopped laying. Coyotes cried at noon, and Maybelle caught sight of a stranger near the south fence, too clean for a drifter, too still for a traveler. She told Elijah, and that night they both slept with a rifle close at hand. The morning of the hearing, they hitched the wagon and dressed in their finest. Elijah wore his pressed vest, the one with copper buttons, and Maybelle wore her mother's brooch, a blue stone set in old silver. She tucked her hair beneath a modest bonnet and walked tall beside her husband. When they entered the courthouse, the room near hushed. Folks stopped whispering and started staring. Not because they didn't know who they were, but because they did. Judge Hanley sat up high, peering over gold-rimmed spectacles like a buzzard looking for weakness. Amos Green was already seated, his boots stretched wide, lips curled in a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Booker," the judge began, "your claim to the property on Red Bluff Road has been challenged under Section 14B, Land Inheritance and Propriety of Settlement." "Inheritance?" Maybelle asked. "He bought that land with saved wages, sir. Fair and square." Green's lawyer, a weasel of a man named Thurston, stood. "With respect, Your Honor, we believe the sale was fraudulent, made under duress from a former criminal employer. The land belongs to the Green family line." Elijah stood slowly. "That land was deeded by the state, paid in full. Records are in that satchel." He handed over the leather bundle, thick with signatures, receipts, even the deed notarized. Hanley flipped through it, frown deepening. After a long pause, he cleared his throat. "The documents appear in order." Maybelle's breath caught, but Amos didn't back down. He stood, hands on his hips. "This ain't about ink," he growled. "It's about what's right. A woman like her, a man like him, it's unnatural. They've made a spectacle of decent folk." Maybelle turned, fire in her eyes. "Ain't nothing decent about you, Amos Green. You see something good, and you aim to poison it." Green's hand drifted to his hip, and Elijah stepped forward, placing himself between Maybelle and that festering anger. "You'll want to think twice," Elijah said, voice like thunder, low and sure, "'cause the next move you make might be your last." The room held its breath. Judge Hanley slammed the gavel down. "Enough. Mr. Green, sit down. This court rules the land rightfully belongs to Mr. Elijah Booker." Case closed. Back at the homestead that night, Maybelle and Elijah didn't celebrate with noise. Just held each other on the porch, stars wheeling overhead. You think it's really over? She asked. Elijah's arms tightened around her. No, but we're still standing. And that's more than most can say. In the darkness, coyotes howled, but they howled from a distance. For now, the fire had passed. But Maybelle knew the wind could change. October brought quiet days, but not peace. The land bore the memory of what came before. Hoof prints near the barn, boot tracks by the well, things that vanished before dawn. Maybelle kept her rifle polished, and Elijah double-checked every latch come sundown. Trouble, they knew, didn't always knock, it crept. But life went on. The cattle fattened well, and the creek didn't dry like it had last fall. Maybelle stitched new curtains, blue gingham this time, and Elijah built her a bench beneath the cottonwood where they first kissed. Still, she noticed the weariness in his eyes. At night, when the fire was low, he'd sit by the window longer than he used to, looking out like he was expecting something. "You're waiting on the past," she said one evening. Elijah shook his head. "I'm listening. Men like Green, they don't take losing kindly." Maybelle reached for his hand. "Then we face it together, like we always do." He kissed her knuckles, rough lips on worn skin. "I know, but I'd burn this place myself before I let them hurt you." It happened on a Tuesday. Maybelle was at the smokehouse, preparing meat for winter, when she heard the first crack. A rifle shot, distant but close enough to raise every hair on her arms. She dropped the knife and ran. Smoke curled over the far field. She could smell it before she saw it burning hay. One of the sheds had gone up. She found Elijah near the barn, blood on his shoulder, his shirt torn. 3 riders had come, masked and mean. He'd driven him off with buckshot, but not before they lit the fire and put a bullet through the edge of his collarbone. "Lord, Elijah," she gasped, helping him inside. "I'll fetch the doctor." "No," he said, eyes steely. "We can't risk leaving the place open." She tore linen into strips, boiled water, cleaned a wound with hands steadier than her breath. He didn't flinch, not once. Just watched her, like the pain wasn't from the bullet, but from seeing her afraid. That night, they slept with rifles close, Elijah's wound bandaged tight, Maybelle's heart thundering beneath her ribs. "They'll come back," he said. "I know," she whispered, "and we'll be ready." 2 days later, Sheriff Dalton rode up. He was a man with more mustache than backbone, but he tried. Found Green's barn half burned. "Looks like someone got a taste of their own trouble. Couldn't prove nothing. But folks are talking." "Let 'em talk," Maybelle said. "We've got nothing to hide." The sheriff nodded and tipped his hat, but Maybelle saw it, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Not toward them, toward what the town might do next. That night, Elijah sat on the porch, bandaged and worn. "I keep thinking maybe this place ain't meant for us." Maybelle sat beside him, laying her head on his uninjured shoulder. "Maybe it ain't, but we're here. We chose it. That means something." He took her hand in his. "You'd stay, even if it gets worse." She smiled. "I'd stay if the sky fell. Because I didn't marry safety, Elijah. I married you." The moon rose quiet, casting silver over the land. And though the fire had passed, the smoke lingered, but so did they. Still standing. Still together. The first snow fell early that year. Light at first, just a whisper of white dust on the ridge, but enough to hush the ground, cover old tracks, and make even the cruelest plans turn slow and cold. Maybelle watched it fall from the cabin window, hands wrapped around a chipped mug of sassafras tea. Elijah sat near the fire, his shoulder healing fine but still stiff with every shift. They hadn't spoken much that morning, not from anger, just the kind of quiet that lives between folks who've carried each other through too much. "I've been thinking," Elijah said finally, his voice low. Maybelle turned. "About what?" "About the house we said we'd build. Something real big. Wrap-around porch. Room for more than just us." She blinked. "You still think about that?" "Every day." She crossed the room and knelt beside him. "Then let's do it. Next spring. We build it together." He smiled, soft and tired, but full of something fierce. "You think this land'll ever let us be?" "I don't reckon it needs to, long as we don't let go." That night, as the snow thickened, a knock came at the door. Not loud, not hurried. Just 3 steady taps, like a message wrapped in frost. Elijah opened it slow, his rifle just behind the door. But it wasn't Amos Green. It wasn't riders in the night. It was a girl, no more than 15, dressed in threadbare wool, her hands raw, her eyes hollow with cold. "Please," she whispered. "They said you help folk. My brother's out there, wagon stuck. He's hurt." Maybelle was already grabbing her coat. They followed the girl into the dark, lantern swinging, snow crunching underfoot. Half a mile out, near the old arroyo, they found the wagon, tilted sideways. A boy maybe 17 moaning under a broken wheel, blood on his leg. Elijah lifted him like he weighed nothing. Maybelle wrapped the girl in her shawl. Back at the cabin, they worked through the night. Maybelle boiled water, cleaned the boy's wound, stitched it with hands that had mended both cloth and kin. Elijah kept the fire blazing, whispering to the boy soft, calm words about surviving storms and learning to stand again. By dawn, the boy was sleeping. The girl clutched Maybelle's hand like a lifeline. "Why'd you help us?" she asked. "Folks said you were different." Maybelle smiled, brushing the girl's hair from her eyes. "Different don't mean wrong. It just means we're built for storms." A week later, when the siblings were strong enough to ride on, they left with a mule, a sack of supplies, and a promise. "We'll come back," the girl said. "We'll tell others about you." Elijah waved from the porch, his arm around Maybelle's shoulders. "You just remember this. Don't let no one tell you who you are." As the wagon disappeared into the frost-dusted horizon, Maybelle leaned into him. "We're still here," she said. He kissed her temple. "And we're still building." The wind picked up, but it couldn't take what they'd built. Not love, not courage, not the fire inside them both. Spring broke like a promise kept. The snow melted slow, leaving muddy tracks and swollen creeks. But where there had been cold, now came green shoots pushing up through the dirt, bold, stubborn things. Maybelle liked that, said it reminded her of herself. Elijah had already started clearing the land for the house. They'd drawn up plans on scraps of old ledger paper, porch wide enough for 6 chairs, kitchen big enough for laughter, and a room in the back where Maybelle could stitch, read, or rest when her feet got tired. They worked together, planning, building, dreaming. They dug the posts, laid the stone foundation, and started hauling timber from the nearby grove. But the land, like life, didn't always give without a skin something back. It was a Sunday when the smoke rose again. Not from their land this time, but from town. Green's ranch had caught fire. Some said it was lightning. Others said it was the whiskey-fueled temper of his eldest boy. Either way, the barn was gone, 3 horses dead, and Green himself was found wandering the edge of his pasture, wild-eyed and broken. The sheriff came out to warn them. "Folks are saying he blames you. Says you cursed him." Elijah stood still. "I didn't burn his barn." "I know that," the sheriff replied. "But that man's got nothing left but hate. Be careful." That night, Maybelle didn't sleep. She sat by the window. Her rifle leaned close. "Elijah," she whispered. He stirred beside her. "Yeah, do you regret it? Choosing me. This life." He rolled over, eyes heavy with love. "You're the only choice I ever made that felt right." She nodded, heart soft. "Even if we gotta keep fighting." He kissed her hand. "Then we fight." Days passed. Weeks. The house took shape, walls going up, roof beams stretching to the sky like arms. And every nail they drove, every board they placed, it became something holy. A place built not just of wood, but of second chances and scars, and the kind of love that don't need proving. Then, one dusk, just as the sun kissed the hilltops and the breeze turned gold, Green came riding up. Alone. No guns. No posse. Just him, hunched in his saddle like a man already buried. Maybelle stepped off the porch. Elijah met her halfway. "You sure?" she asked. He nodded. "Let's see what this ghost wants." Green dismounted slow. His face was worn raw, grief hanging off him like an old coat. "I came," he started, voice cracked and dry. "I came to say you were right." Maybelle blinked. "About what?" He stared out at the half-built house. That hate don't build nothing. It just burns. Elijah crossed his arms. So what now? Green looked at them both, eyes hollow. Now, I go, and I don't come back. He tipped his hat, a broken man's salute, and turned, riding off into the dusk. Years passed. The house stood strong. The porch held chairs. The kitchen held laughter. And the back room, it held stories of a woman once called too much, too wide, too wrong, who became the heart of a home. Children came, not from Maybelle's womb, but from the road, from orphan trains, travelers, kinless cousins. They came hungry, scared, and found warmth in a house that never judged what a body looked like or where a soul came from. And Elijah, older now, still worked the land with Maybelle beside him, her hand steady as ever. "Do you think we made it?" she asked one evening, gray in her hair and lines around her eyes. Elijah smiled, pulling her close. "We didn't just make it. We made it ours." The wind whispered through the grass, and love, battered, bruised, beautiful, held.